all to do is you all have a handout sheet. It's a Google Drive link. We'd like you to click on that, open that up so you'll have that ready to hand or ready to access. And then that link, there are about 6 various um, sheets that we'll be working from. You have virtues, words, and definitions. We also give you an opportunity to go to an app because there's a free app that you can download to get the virtues words. There's an opportunity to look at how to create virtue sentence stems. They talk about the 5 strategies, which we'll be looking at today, competencies, SEL competencies and virtues words, and the 100 stock virtues words that um, Restored Virtues Project uses. So again, welcome. I want to share a little bit about the work that we do at the at the Positive School Center. One of the things that we are connected with around the 5 strategies is looking at how do we become socially and emotionally developed. How do we use restorative practices as a tool to build communities and enhance relationships? How do we sharpen our racial justice and equity lens? And how do we enhance the space to create student, family, and community voice? And we are now moving into a space where we're working on becoming more healing centered. Dr. Sean Ginwright has coined a term called healing centered engagement. And when we look at these 2 top quadrants here, paravases and socially engineered trauma, these are spaces where we look to be trauma responsive. It's one thing to be trauma informed. How do we respond and what's the actions that we take? And we talk about student, family, and community voice. It's also about advocacy and how communities begin to own and access their power authentically. And then for restorative approaches, again, looking at social emotional learning and creating restorative spaces and healthy relationships, we utilize restorative practices. And if you see the outside ring, everything that we do inside of this is looking to sharpen our racial justice and equity lens. We don't hit the bullseye, and we endeavor and are committed to creating equitable and diverse spaces where people feel like they belong. Today, we're going to be looking at virtues language and how that will support you personally and professionally. Every time you get with the Positive School Center, we are going to engage you in a restorative circle. So folks, it's circle time. So one of the things that's important about circles are designed to build relationship and enhance connection. And how you all get to participate in circles is you get to speak with intention, listen with intention, and bring yourself to honor the circle. I actually have to get my talking piece.
Just grabbing some.
This is my talking piece. I'm sorry, I came in and I put it down. So this is the djembe. It's a West African drum. The talking piece is an autobiographical narrative that says or shares what's important to you, what you care about. The person who holds the talking piece speaks, and it means that everyone else is listening. When we facilitate circles, listening is golden and it's the cornerstone of communication and relationships. If we were live, this would get passed around. And what that also does is it monitors the space. So today's question, it's really a statement. It is, I know I belong when. I just see that there's a little typo there, but it's I know I belong when. So you all are going to get an opportunity, and we're just going to do this and share out with our chat box. So I'm going to go first, and you all have the opportunity. Let me look here. We have 22 people to just share when it is that you know you belong. So for me, I know I belong when conversations are like a breath of fresh air. I know I belong when I don't have to put on airs. I know I belong when who I am authentically is accepted, and I feel like who I am is valued. So that's when I know I belong. So we're just going to take a few minutes, maybe about 60 seconds, and you all get an opportunity to populate the chat box. And again, we're working and massaging this out so you can, and if someone is courageous enough, they can come off mute and they can share for themselves when they know they belong. Who would like to share?
I'm open to sharing. This is Latasha.
Yes, please, Ms. Pennant. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Latasha is perfectly fine. So thank you for creating this brave space for me to share into. And so for me, I feel safe, first starting with my body. When there's a sense of I'm grounded in my body. And I notice that by my shoulders being relaxed. I notice that by there being an ease in which I can speak. I notice that by clarity in my thoughts. And I noticed that by me, again, being able to be present.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I think we have some chat submissions where we kind of check and share from our chat.
We do. We have a bunch. Feeling comfortable with the space, when people feel warm and actively invite engagement. I really appreciated just now how you shared around just being mindful of your body. Was really helpful for me.
All right. So we are going to do a closeout at the very end, and we're going to share a little bit about that. But as you heard a few of us share, and then you saw some of the submissions in the chat, what were some of the things that you thought about, or what came top of mind for you with what you saw or just experienced in this small circle experience? Who would like to share? What are some things that you noticed, patterns, or things that you thought about? Yes, Mrs. Nugent.
Sorry, I was having trouble finding the mute button. I think something I noticed is when you first asked the prompt, like I really had trouble figuring out what my response was, but then hearing and seeing other people's responses, I realized I did actually have an answer and I could identify moments. But just sort of on my own with a blank slate, I felt like I was like, I have no idea what I feel like I belong. So that was like nice to experience.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And one of the things, because we have a lot to cover, circles are designed to do several things we call 4 V's. Create a space of vulnerability where when that question literally gets asked, as Ms. Nugent was sharing, it's like, what do I say? Am I going to say the right thing? Do I have the right answer? Do I want to share honestly what I'm going to share? I don't want people to know my business, right? And when we lean into that, that's when authenticity arises. So, Ms. Nugent, thank you for being very authentic and sharing that. Then the second V is voice. Voice begins to emerge. And then after voice emerges, and there's some acknowledgement, there's some patterns, there's some mm-hms and head nods, there is a validation, and that's the third V. And then the last V is that the value, because there is agreement and alignment and there's this connection happening, the social capital and value of the group begins to increase. And the I becomes the us, and the us becomes the we, and we begin forming a new group identity. So that was a brief intro into the 5 steps of the circle script. And just to give you some context specifically around the talking piece, this is the baby naming ceremony that the djembe was used for. I gifted this to my son Allende at about 6 months old. We named him Allende Akintola. This little blue arrow is showing me gifting him the drum so he can find his own heartbeat out in the world. And this is Allende now. He just turned 10. He's too cool for school. And this is our family last year on a trip to Disney. So today, we are requesting for your participation. We use the 4 agreements of courageous conversations. We say stay engaged. I say engagement is attention plus participation equals connection. Speaking your truth, as Ms. Nugent did, just sharing what's right there, being fully self-expressed. We're not looking for the right answer. We're just looking for there to be authentic sharing. You all have years of experience and training, experience discomfort. It's at the end of the day, if you need to stand up, take a stretch break, or do whatever it is to relieve yourself to manage your well-being, please do so, and then expect and accept non-closure. The information that's going to be shared today is literally going to be the tip of the iceberg. A virtues training is a 3-day training, 2 full 3-day trainings, and we're giving an abbreviated version here today. And even if we were to do 3 days, we're not going to address the challenges, issues, and circumstances that you may be dealing with. So we say that we're always continually developing to improve how we are practicing and performing personally and professionally. So what we're going to answer today with you is, what is virtues language? What are the 5 strategies of virtues? And then we're going to discuss how you design a virtue stem. And what you all are going to be doing is looking at and identifying what your virtue strength is and your virtue's growth, your growth virtue. You're also going to get an overview of the 5 strategies, and then we're going to do some practicing where you get to design a sentence stem, a virtue sentence, and a virtue stem. So we want to share a little bit about what virtues are and just a little bit of the foundation. In 1988, a family came together. Linda Popov, Dr. Dan Popov, and her brother, John Kavlin Popov, had this conversation and this great idea at the table around Easter. And they, like many of us, how do we make a big difference in the world? Well, that conversation morphed into them creating this virtues project that they developed in 1991. And then about 5 years later, they were honored by the United Nations, and their tool was stated as a model global program that impacts the lives of families and cultures. And now Virtues is a tool that's in over 135 countries around the world. And what Virtues in short is, it's an asset-based communication style that allows the recipient and the author to tap into their capacities and their potentialities. It's an asset-based conversation and style that allows us to tap into the best of who we are, and we get to practice that. And we're going to be looking at that. And some of the benefits are we get to become more reflective versus reflexive. When we get triggered and when we're charged or we get upset or we get flustered, sometimes we can become very reactive. When we speak virtues language, it slows things down and we become more reflective and less reflexive or reactive. And that gives us an opportunity to build our internal consistency because there's alignment between mind and mouth. And then that builds a kind of power. And with that practice, we get to see and distinguish how we can be self-aware to manage contempt versus curiosity. And when we're reflective, we operate and practice the side of an inquiry-based circumstance. How do we begin inquiring into what's possible? And that increases connection, increases relatedness, and it enhances the community. And it builds a positive culture, whether it's in a home, with our family, in our institutions, or our workspaces. And what it does, it promotes pro-social healthy habits and behaviors. Again, there are lots of challenges sometimes that are in work-based cultures where there's workplace drama and politics. Virtues language is not the silver bullet. It is a tool that supports us in managing ourselves and being very intentional and deliberate and creating harmonious spaces. I'm going to share next a quote, and I would like to get some feedback from you all what this means to you. And there is no right answer. But this quote here says, "The way we communicate with our children has a profound impact on how they develop." So when you see the statement, what thoughts, feelings, images, or memories come to mind? And Emily, if you can type just really that and quick briefly in the chat box, what thoughts, feelings, images, or memories come to mind? And for me, I immediately think about my father. I'm 6 years old, and my father is, saying whatever he's saying. And I just always remember my father, very firm. I knew he loved me, but man, sometimes I would just wonder, like, he would say, "You're too wrong to be right." And I'd be like, "Daddy, I actually am not wrong this time." But he had a lot of children to manage, so, everybody was wrong. But who else? What are some memories, thoughts, or feelings that come to mind when you see the statement? Who would like to share? And we also have the chat box for submissions as well. Everybody put your hands down. I can't call on you all at once.
Andre, in the chat, you have the power of correlation and attunement or co-regulation. And then we have, it sets the tone, sometimes for the good and or the bad. There's an agreement. Children learn who they can be comfortable with and who they need to protect themselves from.
Thank you. And, I have here specifically children. We work primarily in the educational realm. This can easily be the way we communicate with adults, the way we communicate with each other has a profound impact on how we develop or how it impacts the relationships. And with that being said, it takes us to strength virtues and growth virtues. And these are an opportunity to identify the best in us, specifically our strength virtue. It's the thing that is that desirable trait and behavior that has us excel and produce results. It's very natural. I see your hand, Janine. It's energizing when I utilize this virtue. It's most core to who I am. And it's almost kind of like a part of my identity. And then the growth virtue, on the other hand, it's kind of like an undesirable quality or trait or something that I would like to improve and develop. It's an area that I would like to develop. So in your handouts, you all have, it says 100 virtues words. And I would like for you all to open that up and look at those virtues. And while you're doing it, I'm going to share my growth virtue. My strength virtue is it's not actually up here. My strength virtue is rhythm. Rhythm. There are so many things that I do that helps me identify just growing up from a young child with sports. I used to like to dance and DJ and hip hop, and rhythm was just so important in connecting um, and reading the room and understanding social relationships. So rhythm is my strength virtue, and if you don't see it up there, that's okay. You can just say what that is for you. And my growth virtue is in the virtue in its orderliness. So if someone were to come in my office and they would see a pile of papers up here and stuff over there, I promise you, I know where everything is and you're in good hands. I've just always been challenged with orderliness. And it's not sloppy because they nice, neat piles, but it's just a bunch of piles around the place. So orderliness is my growth virtue, and I can see it in other areas of my life. And I would like for you, oh, Janine, you have a question or a statement?
No, it was just the quote before, it made me think about the saying like the power of life and death lies in the tongue or something like that. Like what we say to people shapes, really how they even the child in them, right? Even though we look at each other and we see adults, but it's like it's still a child in me and in each of us. And it's like what we
Yes,
say, so I
yes,
appreciate that.
yes. Thank you so much. And with for Nicole and Emily, if you'll see the hands go up, I may not be able to see it. We want to get right on those. Thank you. So I would like for you all to share in the chat, and if you would like to come off of my mute, what your strength virtue is and what's your growth virtue. So we're going to take about 30 seconds to kind of scan that list. And again, the strength virtue is that thing that you do most, it comes most natural to you. And when you do it, you produce results. It energizes you. It's core to who you are and your identity. And that growth virtue. That growth virtue is that thing that's just like, can't get right. Can't get it right. Or I'm working to get it right and I still can't get it right. Who would like to share their strength virtue and their growth virtue? Do we have any? What do we have in the chats? Oh, Mrs. Cardona?
Yeah, so for myself, I chose my strength virtue is creativity because I feel like whenever, I consider myself a creative person, but whenever I find a creative outlet in any work that I do, I find that it like drives me more. And so like whenever I'm doing like work that, even in like the school building that, might be like cumbersome or tedious, like if there's a way that I can infuse creativity into it, it makes it more interesting to me, and I know that like I can really like bring it out, and it helps me even just be a better employee or worker or counselor. And for growth, I chose acceptance. I definitely struggle with the idea of knowing when to accept something as it is and how it's going to be, and even just accepting sometimes that in others and like that in myself. It's been a journey to try to allow myself to really embrace that as a concept, like just accepting the things that are. So it's definitely a journey of growth for me.
Excellent. Thank you so much. What do we have in the chat submissions?
Yes, we have strength virtue of attunement with the growth of tolerance. Another strength virtue is intuition, where their growth is follow through. We have the strength virtue of positivity and determination, while their growth virtue is long-term planning. Some more strength virtues of enthusiasm, nurturing, and faith, and growth virtues of acceptance as well. So a few are touching and agreeing on acceptance. And then we have added generosity as a strength and grace as a growth.
Excellent, excellent. And what's so powerful, thank you all for sharing Thank you, Ms. Cardona. If you can remember the second slide where we had the healing centered engagement and that pie, social emotional learning and virtues were complementary. They shared the same space. When we are very self-aware and socially aware, there's a higher level of presence, and it allows us to engage and be in community and hold space in a very different way that has us have this intentional way of speaking that's very rigorous, clear, and straight. That there's a straightness, there's a straight talk that supports how we're engaging and who we're engaging with. So as you all were sharing, it's allowing us to become more self-aware. And it's very important, specifically when we're dealing with children and thinking about asset spaces, how we begin to elevate the things that are working and then begin to defocus those deficit areas. Because what that does is it calls them and activates them and it catalyzes them, and adults as well. So we're going to be looking at what the 5 strategies are. The first strategy in the virtues language system is speaking the language of virtues. And what that is language is the vehicle to our thoughts. Language is the vehicle to our thoughts. So how do we begin to speak, as Janine said, affirming, life affirming, and optimal words that hold space for people to feel, that create a space for people to powerfully step into, right? We can't control what people do, but we can create a space and hold space for people virtual in real time in our speaking that encourages and activates people to step into. Then we have recognizing teachable moments. And in short, recognizing teachable moments allows for mistakes and failure to be okay. Because we're not finger wagging, we're not shaming, we're not blaming, we're not judging. We're guiding, correcting, thinking, and acknowledging in a powerful way that allows it to be a teachable moment. So when there is something that's challenging that's happening, we get to reframe it and say, I love the way you were working or diligent with that example. That's not it. What's another example that you can think of? Who else would like to add to that? We're acknowledging what has been shared and say, oh, that's good, that's close, that's right there. There's something else that we're looking for. Then setting clear boundaries, that gives us an opportunity to create healthy structural relationships. And it's important in our speaking to set boundaries. Again, it's about a level of self-awareness. And then the other thing is being clear, the difference and distinction between boundaries and walls. When we're self-aware, when we're socially aware, and when we're intentional about building relationships and making right decisions, we're creating authentic spaces for people to be who they are, to feel like they belong. And that also creates the structure, very distinct from trauma, walls, and putting up barbed wire and a thick fence and trying to control things. And then speaking from that space as well. And we can only imagine what that might look like. Honoring the spirit is literally, I will use this term Salbona. Salbona means, it's a East African term that means I see you. I see your hands up over there, Janine. And Salbona means, not only does it mean I see you, it means I see all of who you are. I see your gender. I see you for your skin complexion. I see you for your ethnicity. I see you for your zip code. I see you for your talents. And I honor that in who you are. That's allowing a space of diversity and equity to bring itself forward. And then lastly, the last strategy is offering companioning. And lots of times we want to give advice, we want to counsel, Companioning is just, hey, let me just listen. Let me amplify and turn the antenna up, that big satellite dish, and let me listen and listen some more. And then when I listen some more, let me listen again. These are a lot. We're not going to go over all these. We are going to look at how do we speak the virtues language, right? And the way that we do that is, again, virtues language, is the connection. Mrs. Pennant, I see a hand up.
Yeah, so I had a question, just, curiosity more so, and I know there's space for so much in this model, but as we're talking about even starting with the first one, just noticing, the use of language as the vehicle of thoughts. And I think what comes up for me is that sensations is the language of the body. So how do we then bring awareness to the body, which also has a narrative, right? Which also has a part of the story to tell.
That's,
So just kind of curious about that.
I love that question, and I'm so glad that you raised that because I kind of spoke a little bit to it. As I mentioned earlier, social emotional learning and virtues language share the same space in our healing centered space. And when we think about creating awareness, and the term that you may hear people use is somatics. Somatics is having full body awareness. It's how we begin to align. And it takes time to really get centered in my body, to begin to listen to how my body feels, how my thoughts, and then aligning mind, mouth, and body align up to have an articulated conversation that matches that. So that's an exploration, and it takes a lot of practice. And thank you for lifting that up, Mrs. Pennant. I know you said Latasha. It's just my old home training. And thank you. So we use language is the access to our thoughts, right? It's asset-based communication that taps into our capacities and potentialities, and it gives us the opportunity to acknowledge, correct, think, and guide. And again, we're touching on some of these things, just skimming the surface. But what you all are going to get an opportunity to do is look at how we begin to develop the muscle to begin to have our mind, mouth, and body align. And it starts in renaming and reframing. So what we're going to do is a quick exercise and activity. And I'm going to go through it and then give you all an opportunity. So you want to think of someone whose behavior you find challenging. That behavior would be my son Allende, right? Identify the challenging behavior. Allende gets frustrated specifically when he's doing his math homework, right? Now, he not only gets frustrated, he gets upset. Sometimes he gets unsettled, right? And it's literally just happened last night. I was just sharing with Emily, we were up till 10 o'clock last night. He had wrestling practice. He didn't use the time in his aftercare program, and he was very frustrated. So when Allende is frustrated, what I would like to do is reframe Allende, like you to practice a little more Kujichagulia. Kujichagulia is the second principle of Kwanzaa and self-determination. And then the virtues poster is just being determined. How do we become determined to process through frustration? Or if he's upset, which he was, Allende, I would like for you to be a little more patient. Peace would be a good word, but we've been moving through this, so it really is patience, even though peace seems like a right fix for being upset. And then being unsettled, being purposeful. Hey, there's some other words that you can think of. If someone is being stubborn, you can say, hey, I see you being determined but I would like for you to be more cooperative. If someone is talking back, see you're being very honest, but I would like for you to use some tact, right? What these activities do is give us an opportunity, again, when we talk about being reflective, to slow a process down. And I don't want to mislead us in thinking that doing this activity, we're gonna get it instantly. Sometimes I actually miss things that happens with my son and I see it later, but I almost know what's gonna happen again. So now I have that word. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get into groups, and you all are going to get an opportunity to work through some renaming and some reframing. And we may not get to all of them, but I would at least like for you all to get to the first 3 bullets where it's identifying someone that has a challenging behavior, and identify the challenging behavior, and then at least one reframe or renaming. Emily, are we ready to have them in groups? And we're going to go into breakout sessions on this one.
Into another,
What'd you say?
I got pulled into another room, so my.
Oh, no worries. We're going to come back to the larger
Okay.
room. And folks are going to be joining us coming back from their groups.
I was just saying, I have my kids are young, and I think also just thinking back about to the stubbornness, but as I have a kid home who's sick today, but thinking about like purposefulness and a lot of these things, it depends on whether they're doing what I want them to do or what they want to do. And just kind of also taking the perspective of whose intentions are being used on any given day.
Let me share my screen again. Give me one moment, folks. Emily, do you see?
I see your presenter view.
All right. Do you all see my screen?
No, sir.
Not yet.
All right.
And while Andre is pulling up his screen, is there anyone that would like to share their experience or give it a try to the public group? I know Natasha was sharing in our group and she got cut off.
I can just finish what I was saying real quick, which was I was speaking to a behavior on that I saw from one of my bosses who was not being responsive, and I could reframe that as, I appreciate your detachment, and I'm calling on your maybe friendliness or compassion or even flexibility, maybe.
Thank you for sharing.
Excellent. Great. Emily, what does the screen look like now?
You were golden. You're all set.
All right, excellent. So this activity, and whenever we go and do, no worries. One of the things that's the renaming and reframing is designed to do, as she was eloquently sharing, it slows the process down. And what this does is it gives us an opportunity to manage, self-manage and self-regulate our triggers, and then have our language catch up to how we're feeling. So I think Mrs. Pennant was asking that question about the somatics. It's beginning to have mind, body, and mouth begin to catch up in a line. And it's a practice to get them in alignment. And when the closer they come to alignment, there is a rigor and intentionality in the speaking, again, that becomes very powerful. These are certain stems that shows us how to acknowledge and think, how to create statements that guide someone, or how to correct. And they're called virtue stem statements. And one of the things that we do is you have an opening phrase, you select a virtue statement, and then there is the evidence of that statement. And inside of your handouts is literally just called the virtue sentence stem. It's titled virtue sentence stem. And we're going to be working from those. And the sentence stem is one, again, looking at an opening phrase. As we see here, this top line, I acknowledge your determination in completing this task. One of the things that supported me specifically with my son Allende was in correcting, or more so in guiding. It was, Allende, how can you work and be more patient with yourself? Because Allende likes to fire through the examples to get the work done. And when he does that, he makes a lot of mistakes, and then he gets upset because he has to go back and do the work over. So it's like, Allende, how can you be more patient and slow down so you can get the results that you want? And I'm clear he knows what he's doing, because we actually see the work that actually gets done. What we're going to be doing in this last half, this last phase, as we turn the corner, is we all are going to be working on creating some virtue stems by doing a virtue stem practice. So what we get to do is create a scenario, and then we reframe that scenario or behavior with a virtues word. I'm going to give an example to work with you all. And then we create a 3-part virtue statement. So the example that I gave here, and interestingly enough, this is what my son Allende, he likes to bounce the ball in the house. So the scenario is called bouncing the ball in the house. And when he's doing that, this is his second year playing football. He's bouncing the ball off the wall. It's not a basketball, but he'll bounce it on the floor and catch it. And interestingly, I see his commitment, like he's developing an agility and a facility with this ball in his hand, right? I also see the passion that's there, and there's some level of discipline with him holding that ball. One day I'm going to be able to tell this story, and you're going to hear it. Allende is someone who is, a high school athlete. But it started because he was bouncing that ball, and his father kept saying, "Stop bouncing the ball." But as opposed to being frustrated and upset, Allende, I see your commitment, put the ball down. Or Allende, I see your commitment, I see your passion about developing your football skills, be cooperative, and put the ball away. Nowadays, I'm sharing with Allende, I'm using the word helpful a lot, because I want him to be able to see that being cooperative, following instructions, and listening is a way to help. Because for Allende, helping is when he sees us doing something and he wants to come and jump in. And I love that about him. And I need him to know, hey, Allende, helping is also being able to listen and follow instructions. So I found myself using helpful a lot when I'm speaking with Allende. So what we're going to do is just speculate. This is an opportunity for us to speculate with this activity. What are some scenarios that you can think of on your job? What are some scenarios that you can think of in school or your workplace or in your home? And then what would be a virtual reframe? And then what sentence stem can you come up with and create? And then over here on the side, I have some challenging behaviors, specifically as it relates to school, where there's questioning authority. Sometimes you can say they're being expressive, or they're being independent, manipulative, they're being assertive. We want them to be assertive. Bullying. Bullying is a tough one for me. I would like to reframe that about strength, and positive assertiveness. Disrespectful talk, that can be reframed for being fully self-expressed, being determined, for lying. And I'm just thinking these in my head. I see you being creative, but we would like for you to be more intentional in your speaking and truthful. So there's a number of ways, and what it does is it takes away from the deficit, and it takes the charge out of the situation or the circumstance. And again, it helps us begin to reframe and aerate and lighten the space, and it slows it down. So who would like to take a shot at coming up with a scenario that you've kind of seen a recurring theme happen that you would like to put out there? We can work collectively as the group to put some structures around it. Janine?
Yes. One thing that comes to mind is just like kind of like nosiness, like amongst like colleagues, everybody just in everybody's business. And it's like, I guess the one thing that comes to mind is like, well, maybe people just want organizational transparency. Maybe that's what it is. But I could use some guidance. So everybody, tag
All
your
right.
share.
So the scenario is nosiness.
Yes.
And what are some words that we could potentially come up with around a reframe? It's interesting. I love the way that you said that, because I mean, the first thing I thought about was connection. Sometimes people just want to be connected. And I don't think connection is in the virtues, but we can look at our handouts and look at those 100 virtues words and see what comes up that we would like to reframe. What's another word besides connection?
So in the chat, we have inquisitive twice. I added inquisitive along with Beverly, seeking connection or community, curious,
Mm-hmm.
wanting to help or know how they can help.
Got it. And let's put together a sentence stem. So I like curious. It could be all of them that we've had. I see you're curious about your coworkers. Let's please be mindful of people's personal business and space. Who would like to take a shot at creating the sentence with one of those words?
And then I see you, Ms. Penn, in the chat as well. I think some of that too with Janine's example of like really thinking about organizational transparency. And I think with virtues, realizing working this kind of with this model with adults and within a team, as well as at home and also in school, I think some of this is the thing I appreciate the most, is that it really pushes me to take the perspectives of other people. And I think for that moment of Janine is that you're not just like looking to ascribe like one of the words, but like kind of going through that process and even sitting with some of those restorative questions and thinking through like, well, why do folks want that? So I think I liked, Janine, kind of the answer that you had kind of thrown out at the beginning, and even thinking about like, what does that mean in terms of like commitment? Like, is it coming from a commitment or something else? And it depends. Sometimes it really is just straight up nosiness. But I think like the kind of call back to listen and to take others' perspectives, calling on that SEL skill of that when you're thinking about the relationship skills, is something with time and, working with students has taught me. Sorry, go ahead, Andre.
No, I was going to say the beautiful thing about virtues is not a magic bullet, right? But what it does is it creates a future to live into. When we're utilizing these words and implementing them, it creates a social field of synergy to call on, and again, it's potential capacities. Our potentialities and capacities, I would say it creates a future to live into. So it's a redirection, and it shifts, and it takes away shame, blame, judgment, finger wagging, right? And those other things, which has us move in a more deficit and a low vibrational space. So folks, we are coming to our close. We literally just skimmed the surface. We have the survey link in the box. I thank you for taking this virtues journey or this virtues voyage with us. In your handout, there is a tutorial, an app that shows you how to get virtues on your phone. You have the 100 virtues. They have an education version, a family version. They have various kinds of virtues. They're free. They combine several of them, and then there's some that you pay for. We're not selling them. Don't want you to think that. But when you sign up for the app, you get a free version that combines 4 or 5 of them: education, the family, the work, and then a basic general virtue stock. They take about 10 or so virtues from each one of those. That's in your handout as well. Thank you for your powerful listening. Thank you for your generous and powerful sharing. That completes our session. You can complete the survey.